Namaste and welcome everyone. And we have Robert Spencer with us today after a long time. So, welcoming Robert Spencer with Vibhuti Jha, and we are going to talk about the Trump effect on Islam in the world. It's a rather unique topic, but I think that needs to be discussed because in the past we have discussed how the democratic policies are having an adverse impact on the world as far as the Islamic journey is concerned. So, welcome, Robert.
Thank you. Good to see you,
Welcome,
gentlemen, again. My friends, hello.
welcome to the show. And this is the question. I shoot it straight to you. Is Trump going to affect the Islamic privilege all around the world?
Very likely, yes, because when you're talking about Islamic jihadis, you're talking about people who believe in strength and weakness, and that's how they see the world. You are strong or you are weak, and the strong will dominate the weak. And so they see Trump as strong, and they see Biden as weak. And so all through the last 4 years, they've been advancing with impunity. Even just this morning, I just saw before we started taping this that Biden sent another 10 billion to Iran after the election. On top of the 10 billion he sent them a few months after the October 7th attacks. So Biden is keeping the Islamic Republic of Iran in power and making it possible for the Iranian regime to remain and not be overthrown. And that's criminal, but that is the weakness that he's manifesting that is being taken advantage of by the jihadis. Trump, on the other hand, is certain not to give any more money to the Islamic Republic. And this will likely cause them a great difficulty. And they're being so unpopular with their own people already, it could cause the fall of the regime.
That's an interesting thought. But what about the Syrian implosion?
Syria is only happening, as so many things, because of Biden's weakness. And that is that the jihadis are taking power there, or seem to be. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a jihad group. They have been whitewashed in the media, and all the Western establishment media organs have been claiming that al-Jilani, the leader, is just a revolutionary who wants freedom for his people. This is belied by the man's own career. He's been a jihadi for years. He came out of Al-Qaeda. He was in ISIS. And then he started this Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and was explicit about wanting to establish Sharia in Syria. Now, why are there jihad groups in Syria when the Islamic State was defeated there in 2017? Once again, because of Biden. Because where Trump drove out ISIS and destroyed their caliphate, when Biden came in, he resumed the Obama policy of actually funding those jihad groups against Assad, because Assad was an ally of Iran. And now you might think, wait a minute, if Assad is an ally of Iran, why is he giving money to Iran on the one hand and funding the people who are fighting Iran's proxy on the other? And this is partly because of the complete ignorance and incoherence in the State Department in Washington, but also it's designed ultimately to make everyone dependent upon American largesse, and then presumably they will not be hostile to American interests. This is, I think, ridiculous, wrong-headed, counterproductive in so many ways. And one of them is that, once again, these people see the world in terms of strength and weakness. And so when Biden sends them millions of dollars or billions, they think he's weak and stupid because they're chanting death to America. And he says, oh, here's $10 billion. So this Syrian situation is, oddly enough, in part a defeat of Iran and in part a victory. A victory not for Iran, but for the Sunni jihadis, because the Iranians used Syria as a staging ground for attacks against Israel. They would ship weapons, armaments through Syria to Hezbollah and so on. And now that's gone because the Israelis crushed Hezbollah and they weakened Iran and Syria collapsed. And so this is all Iran on the ropes. And then here comes Joe with 10 billion to bail them out.
Oh, come on, don't collapse, please.
Yeah.
Not in my arms.
And so then he's giving money to the Sunni jihadis, and the Sunni jihadis are taking over. So people say, I see this on Twitter with all the anti-Semitism that's resurgent in the world today. I see people saying, "Oh, Assad fell because Israel wanted it, and Israel really controls America, controls the world." This is not a victory for Israel. The Israel did defeat Hezbollah and has weakened Iran, and that's why Assad fell. But the Sunni jihadis in Syria are saying, now we have Damascus, we're going to go on and take Jerusalem. They have no interest in helping Israel. They want to fight Israel. And the only reason why they're able to do it is because of Biden and American help. And the only reason why Iran is still the Islamic Republic is because of Biden and American help. So all of this, we hope, will end when Trump takes office. But I say we hope because, remember, there was another thing. 2016, Trump was 2020, Trump was president. And he said, get the American troops out of Syria. Now, there's a small number of American troops in Syria, and we see how effective they were over the last few weeks. They didn't do anything. They couldn't do anything. And the jihadis took over. But Trump wanted them out of there years ago, and there was a low-level official, I don't remember his name, I should look this up, but you can find this easily. This was well documented at the time. There was a low-level official who ignored Trump's order and kept the troops in Syria, and then was bragging about it because he was part of the deep state, you know, the Democrats who were entrenched in the government bureaucracy, and they were preventing Trump from enacting his agenda. So the troops stayed in Syria, and Biden, of course, kept the troops in Syria because he didn't want to withdraw them in the first place. But now we see that Trump was right. They had no business being there. They were no help there. And there's no purpose accomplished by having them there. So they should have been withdrawn years ago, and I hope Trump will withdraw them now. But the bottom line is all of this is happening because of the weak, contradictory, and wrong-headed policies of the Biden administration.
Vibhuti?
Yeah, I mean, you have used some very powerful words. One of them being the ignorance of State Department.
They're idiots.
I do not know if it is ignorance of
Addle-headed.
Are they stupid or evil? Yeah, that's always the question. There are probably a lot of them that are evil, but I think most of them are stupid.
And then you also said that how a low-level officer
Yes,
did not carry on Trump's instructions. Then
right.
we also talked about the potential, the giving away the money to Iran by Biden, billions, as if it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Just print another currency and just give it, whether they are fake notes or not, I do not know.
Well, they might
the point of the matter is that is America outplaying itself in the chess game, the labyrinth of the chess game in the Middle East? And that's why Mr. Trump keeps talking about all the time. Why are we there? Because when we are there, we become foreign invaders and they want us out, but they want us in to solve their problem. And he said they're fighting for thousands of years, those tribal people. Why are we there at all? To which I will also pose an inquiry with you, is that the tilt towards Iran happened with Obama. Whether it was driven by the desire that Bushes were very close to Saudi Arabia, the petrodollar and everything else, was Obama playing a game, Iran, Shia, Sunni, and whatever? And as always, we are inept in handling that scenario.
It couldn't be more inept. The whole thing is inept from beginning to end. And yes, that did originate with Obama. Obama had this idea, or the people running Obama had this idea of empowering Iran to become the source of stability in the Middle East. Now, this was stupid to begin with because Iran is Shiite, and the Shiites are only 15% of the Muslims around the world, and the Sunni states would never accept Shiite leadership over the Islamic world. It was never going to happen. But Condoleezza Rice, who was not Obama's staffer, but Secretary of State under George W. Bush, she said, well, you know, they still see things in terms of Sunnis and Shiites. They're going to have to get over that. And that's crazy. This is the kind of, that's why I say they're stupid in the State Department. They don't have any idea. You can't just go up to the Muslims and say, you have to get over this Sunni Shiite business. What it's been going on for 1400 years. What do they think they can give them to make them cut it out? It's rooted in Islamic theology. It's rooted in deeply embedded hatreds that have to do with Islamic history. How are they going to get rid of it? And of course they didn't. But I think the Obama people also thought this way, and they thought that it would be no problem that Iran would take the place of Iraq. You know, Iraq, Saddam Hussein's Iraq, he was a terrible tyrant, but he was a source of stability in the region, actually. And things were much quieter when he was there. When the Americans removed him, that's when a lot of the present day troubles began. And so the Obama people had the idea that they would make Iran the new Iraq, and it would be the new stability in the area. And then Trump, he said, this is ridiculous, and he rolled back the Iran nuclear deal and repudiated all of the things that Obama thought of as his greatest foreign policy achievements. So when Obama got back into power under the Biden administration, which many have called Obama's third term, and many have referred, as you know, to the famous video where Obama says, yes, I would like a third term from my basement, where I am on the phone to the president and he's listening to me in his earpiece, and then he says what I tell him. And many people believe that this is what we have now and have had since 2017. And that in any case, certainly the Biden administration is a lot of Obama people. And he reimposed a lot of the Obama policies, including this policy of appeasement toward the Islamic Republic of Iran. But the whole thing was crazy to begin with because they're over there every Friday, you know, in the mosques in Iran, all over Iran. They are ordered. They have to do it. Friday is the big day for the sermon. And so you go at noon prayer on Friday. It's a bigger prayer time than the others. And you have the sermon, and it's usually a bigger crowd. And at every Friday prayer, the prayer, the big one in midday, they have to chant "Death to America." It's an order from the government. And the Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, he said, this is not, "Death to America" is not just a slogan. "Death to America" is a policy. That's what we're working for. And then the Obama people think if we send them a few $1 billion, then they'll love us. And see, this has worked all around the world. I understand why they think it, but it's still stupid. It's worked all around the world since World War II. After World War II, the United States defeated Germany and Japan, and then gave billions of dollars to both to rebuild. And they rebuilt and became secular democracies that were friends of the United States. And they're grateful to the United States for helping them out after the destruction of both of their countries. So this became the foreign policy paradigm of how the United States works. We go give people a lot of money, and they're supposed to be grateful, and they're our friends. But you know, in personal relationships, just as between nations, you cannot really buy friends. And you might spend a lot of money on someone who's completely ungrateful. And this is the case with Islamic countries, because the Quran says that the Jews and Christians will never accept you. They will never be satisfied with you until you discard Islam and become one of them. Now, this is an important verse of the Quran, because when the Americans come and say, here's $1 billion, build a hospital, build a highway, build a school, here, it's all on us, then instead of saying, oh, we're so grateful, we love you now, the Muslim countries say, Pakistan says, look, see, they just want to get you away from Islam. And so they come to you and they're nice and they're friendly, but they will never be satisfied with you until you leave Islam and become Jews or Christians. That's what Allah said. It's 2:120, I think. Let me make sure. I happen to have the Quran right here.
Okay.
It's not exactly a pocket edition, but it's useful to carry around. And let's see, I think it's 2:120. But yeah, it is. And the Jews will not be pleased with you, neither will the Christians, until you follow their religion. Say, indeed, the guidance of Allah is guidance. And if you follow their desires after the knowledge that has come to you, then you would have from Allah no protecting guardian or helper. So see...
Well, that explains a lot, actually.
Exactly, yes. It's very big, very important for foreign relations. But nobody in the State Department, here we come back to what I said at the beginning, they're idiots. They're stupid, because nobody in the State Department studies Quran to understand foreign policy. As a matter of
it was banned. I thought you were supposed to educate them, and then it was taken off.
Yes, that was years ago. And they know, they think they know now that the Quran is no more relevant to foreign policy than the Bible or Bhagavad Gita or any other book you can name. It doesn't have any importance at all. And yet, you have these entities that follow Quran, that believe that Quran is not only their guide for religion, but their guide for politics. And so it's stupid not to study it and not to understand it. And it shows why the United States foreign policy in regard to Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, everywhere else, Somalia, Sudan, we could go on and on and on. It never works. We give them all this money and it never works. And why does it never work? Because it only makes them more suspicious. It doesn't make them grateful. They think, see, they're trying to entice you away from Islam, because that's what the Quran says.
If I may follow up on that one, you said policy of appeasement, money makes the world go round, the Hollywood mantra.
Vibhuti, please permit me. I have two very, very important follow-up questions.
Okay, you go ahead.
Number one, do you think Obama was a closet Islamist? And
Yeah,
number two, the Hussein in his name is Shia or Sunni?
I think he's Sunni. I only say that because Barack Hussein Obama Sr. was from Kenya. In Kenya, it's Sunni. So I don't think he was Shiite. Also, Barack Obama himself, the president, made a trip to Pakistan in the 1980s, I believe it was. And of course, there are some Shia in Pakistan, but not very many. It's very likely that he was there in the company of Sunnis. And yes, is he closet Islamist? I don't know that he's a Muslim. Some people have said he's a Muslim. Certainly, there are indications.
You can be an Islamist without being a Muslim.
Yes. And that's a very interesting, that's a very noteworthy point, actually, because that may be what we're dealing with here. This is a very fraught issue. I don't know, you're probably aware, but in the time that he was president, and when he was running for president, there were some people who said, well, you know, his father and his stepfather were both Muslims, and Islam is patrilinear, and so if they were Muslims, then he's a Muslim. And then in his autobiography, his first autobiography, he wrote 2 or maybe 3 now, I don't know. But in his first one, he says he got in trouble in school in Indonesia for making faces during Quran class. And the Christians didn't go to Quran class in Indonesia. They went to Bible class, I suppose, but they didn't go to Quran class. That was for the Muslims only. And so he's admitting that he was raised a Muslim, at least for a time, while he lived in Indonesia. And yet it became this terrible thing to say that showed that you were a racist bigot and an Islamophobe as well if you said, well, is Obama a Muslim? And yet there were strange things. You know, the Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, and especially the ISIS people, the Islamic State, they like to raise their index finger to show, and there are pictures after pictures, even from Syria this past week, of the alleged, the so-called rebels who took Damascus, and they're standing there on tanks or something, holding their finger up. And this is to say the oneness of Allah, not three like the Trinity in Christianity or many, many gods, but just the one. And so Obama, there's a famous picture that he's at an international gathering, and there's a group of the heads of Muslim states, and he walks by them and he does this as he walks by them. What was that all about? He must know, he's not a stupid man, what the significance of that is. Because, you know, this is another thing where people like to make fun of you. If you say, well, you know, that's the ISIS symbol when you do that. They say, no, Muslims do this all the time when they want to say the oneness of God. And also politicians and many people, anybody making a point might wave his finger. Okay, that's fine. And yet it has very particular significance for ISIS and for the people who are fighting jihad today. They tend to do it more than anybody else. Now, does Obama not know this? Unlikely. So why is he intentionally recalling this very fraught symbolism? It's strange. And I think that one of your suggestion is probably the most cogent, that he's not a Muslim himself. There's never been any indication that he is. He may have been raised one, but he certainly is not observant today if he is. And yet he has a great regard for Islam, a great respect for Islam, much more than for Christianity, which he supposedly professes, and yet he criticizes Christianity frequently, and he never says a negative word about Islam. And so it's most likely that because of his upbringing, because of his father and his stepfather, he thinks Islam is great, and he thinks it's wonderful for societies. He's just not a Muslim himself. So yes, a non-Muslim Islamist is a good way to sum it up.
Right. Vibhuti, please carry on.
Sorry. No, my question was about, you know, another wonderful phrase you used, that people running Obama. You know, you said that people running Obama. So likewise, like Biden term was known as Biden Obama 3.0. He is definitely very annoyed because he was blaming Republicans for all the, you know, for fraudulent election and winning the election in a negative way. How many people who are supportive of Obama, and he had tremendous amount of, you know, followers everywhere because he was such a charming character. He is such a charming character, lost a lot now. But how do you think people around Trump will let him succeed in his intent and desire? Although I must say it, that he has put in this administration people whom he trusts and people who have been loyal to him. And I just saw the news flashing out that all senators have now confirmed that all his nominees will be approved by the Senate. That's a great news.
Yes.
So that's a great news. So how do you think people around him, just as the low-level officer did not let his order be implemented there, how many people would be trying to sabotage him from within?
That's the big question. And that's where it's very strange. And I don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't know what's happening now. I don't know that anybody does. Because this is a man they tried to destroy for 8 years. There has never been anything like this in American politics. And the United States used to pride itself on having the mutual respect between the opposing political factions, such that we had the peaceful transfer of power and the idea that one side, even if it lost, no matter how strenuously it believes that it's correct, would peacefully relinquish power for the other party after an electoral defeat. And all that changed. The Biden people will tell you Trump changed it with the January 6th insurrection. But that's exactly where they are doing the very famous old tactic of accuse your enemy of what you yourself are guilty of doing. Because this is not only, Biden is not only the worst president in American history, but he's a different kind of president that we've never had before, and I hope we never have again. Not just that he's run by other people, but that his administration is the first one to try to criminalize opposition. His administration is the first one, instead of respecting the opponent, tries to frame him for crimes he didn't commit, tries to get him put in jail, tries to make sure that he will never be able to return to power. And they did this in so many ways. They accused him of Russian collusion. That was false, and it didn't work. They tried to impeach him not once but twice. The second time when he was out of office, because if he had been convicted, he wouldn't have been able to run again. And that's what it was all about. They claimed that he staged an attempt to overthrow the government with a bunch of grandmothers snapping pictures inside the Capitol. It was ridiculous, but they claimed it, and there's still people in prison today because of their participation in this ridiculous January 6th insurrection, where the police opened the doors. They're on video, opening the doors to the Capitol, inviting people in, and then the people who went in go to jail.
That's a nice trap.
Yeah, it was a big trap. It was a frame up. Trump is saying peacefully and patriotically protest against a manifestly stolen election, and instead of peacefully and patriotically protesting, some of them get invited in, and some of them were unruly, there's no doubt, at the Capitol, although then the FBI is asked, how many double agents did you have there pretending to be Trump supporters? And they won't answer. The whole thing seems to be fabricated to try to frame Trump as trying to overthrow the government by a guy with Viking horns and some grandmothers. I mean, it's so ridiculous on the face of it, because if you think about it, this is the most powerful government and the most powerful military on earth. And a couple hundred people in the Capitol, it's so weak that they can overthrow it that easily? That's insane. And Trump never thought that. He told them to proceed peacefully. And so they banned him from social media and erased all his posts so nobody could see that he said proceed peacefully. And it was only that many people saw it themselves and remembered. And so all of that, and then more, and then the convictions on 34 felonies. And what were the felonies? They had to do with business dealings that were not felonies, they were misdemeanors. And that ordinarily, if it were you or I who were being charged with doing exactly what Trump did, it would have been one misdemeanor. And instead, he was charged with 34 felonies because each one was treated as a separate crime, which is not how it's usually done. Usually it's all put together in one. So they could say he's a convicted felon. They could say he is somebody who has complete contempt for the law. And they were the ones who had the complete contempt for the law. They were the ones who fabricated all this. And more, the rape charge from a woman who is completely unbelievable, didn't even remember what year it happened. She said she loved this program on television where there was exactly the same case as she described Trump doing. She doesn't call the police for 30 years. She doesn't notify anybody. And then suddenly she's accusing him of rape. And the whole thing was designed to destroy him so that the American people would not have the choice of electing him to president again. Now, all that said, what's unbelievable in this scenario is that it all failed. It's very clear that this is corruption on a massive scale and an attempt to criminalize opposition in the United States. And there's much more I could say, but we'd spend the whole show on it. So I'll leave it alone. People can look it up for themselves. But the thing is Even after all that, Trump survived and became the nominee. And then even after all that, he was elected, which is even stranger because in 2020,
even after assassination attempt.
And 2 assassination attempts. And they in 2020, remember they're counting the votes in Atlanta, and suddenly the water main breaks, and they say we have to go home. There's the water main's broken and the place is flooded, and so we'll count the rest tomorrow. So they stop and go home, and then after it's closed and everybody's gone home, the surveillance cameras catch them. They didn't go home. There's no water on the floor, and they take all the ballot boxes out of under the tables and start counting in, and it's all for Biden. And in Detroit, they were doing similar things, and people were protesting, and they cover the windows with paper so people couldn't see in. There were so many things that the only explanation for is that they were cheating, and they all have excuses and likely stories and elaborate scenarios, but it's very clear. 2020, you compare the votes in 2020 to 2024, there's 3.5 million less in 2024 when everybody was passionate and very excited about the election, and yet 3.5 less votes. Why? Because they didn't exist in 20. They faked them. And anyway,
are they still counting them?
Yeah, they're still counting.
California is still counting, yes.
Yeah, they're still counting. Maybe they'll find them, and it'll turn out she won after all. But see, this is what's strange about it. What I don't understand is that after all these things they tried to do to destroy this man, now they let him win the election, and now they're going to let him become president again. I keep waiting for something else. I don't think they're giving up that easily. Congressman Raskin already said, on January 6th, we will not certify. We won't allow him to become president. And so we'll see how that shakes out in a month.
Yeah.
I don't know. But maybe he will become president on January 20th. It's very strange. But
how do you think how do you think this Islamophobia campaign is proceeding now after Trump's election or
Islamophobia
Trump's possible election?
Yeah, his possible election is right. Islamophobia is now taken for granted as being something that's legitimate when it's a completely made up concept that's designed to intimidate people into being afraid to oppose jihad violence. But nowadays, especially on campuses, we have the Jews and pro-Israel students being threatened, being brutalized, being beaten up, and then the college president comes out and says, we condemn anti-Semitism and Islamophobia.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's bothering the Muslim students. The Muslim students are the ones brutalizing the Jewish students. And yet they've made it so that people think they have to say this. If they speak about anti-Semitism, they have to speak about this other supposedly victimized group. Now, nobody should be out attacking innocent Muslims. There's no excuse for that if it ever actually happens. But the fact is, it's not happening. And the idea of Islamophobia is only a tool to silence people like you and me who speak honestly about what the teachings of Islam really are and about what's really happening with Islam and Muslims around the world. And so is Trump going to change that? I don't know. Trump, he does a lot of good things. And I think that one of the things that's the greatest thing in his favor is how much the left has tried to destroy him. Obviously, they're very afraid of him. And I think if they're that afraid of him, that they tried to kill him twice, that they tried to impeach him twice, that they lie about him left and right, and they've never thrown so many things at one person. He must be very right. He must be very dangerous to all the forces of evil in the world. And so I have no problem with that. But I haven't heard him speaking about that Islamophobia is a scam and so on. I hope that he will have people around him who will clue him into that. But there's been no indication of it thus far.
Picking on your word, which you said just now, that the left is realizing that he's so right that they can't do anything about it, was a proof came about when this morning Joe on CNBC And Mika and that fellow, I don't remember his name, Florida congressman,
Scarborough.
Joe, yeah. They went to Mar-a-Lago, and the phrase was they kissed the ring, and they came back, and they were blasted by the left wingers that you made peace with that man. So the point here is very correct, Robert, that
They,
you
they,
know
they,
we
they
have
should blast. They should blast our Justin Trudeau also.
Justin Trudeau made him. He became the governor of Canada.
I'm sorry, we have named him Trudeau, not
Yeah,
Turd.
Trudeau.
Yeah, we call him Turd. But
governor.
governor, he is now his governor. So, so his Mar-a-Lago visit was a total fiasco. I mean, we know that because Trump minced no words, and he issued a tweet statement, Truth Social as well. But the point of the matter remains here is that people around, how is it? How is it that these people, Ilhan and Tlaib and others, they have succeeded in establishing Islamophobia as a reality? Whereas, as you rightly said, you and I know it is not true. We don't attack them, they attack us.
Mhm.
So how do we negate their victimhood, so to say, that they come about with? Where has it come from? How does it get established that anything that you ask, even make an inquiry, is a phobic thing or a bigoted thing?
Well, they've been very clever. That's how they succeeded. They've been very smart. They know more about American society than most Americans. And so they know, for example, that what's the worst thing you can be in America today? The worst thing. A murderer? A rapist? What? The worst thing you can be in America today is a racist. If you're a racist, if you're a murderer, you might go to prison for a while. If you're a rapist, same thing. But if you're a racist, you might not go to prison, but your life is over. Your career, you can't get a good job, you have no friends, everyone hates you, everyone despises you. It's the worst thing in America. Now, we can go into why that is. That's a long story. It has to do with slavery and Jim Crow and all of this. That's all true. But on the other hand, America is actually the country where racial and religious and all other minorities have more rights and freedoms than in practically any other country on earth. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. But this is the left's narrative that America is a deeply racist society and that it's the worst sin. It's the national sin. And it's even, Biden just went to Angola. And he, right after the pardon of Hunter Biden, he decides he's going to go to Angola. And in Angola, he's speaking about how terrible it was, slavery. And I think, why are we still talking about this? What other aspect of 150 years ago is still discussed? But it's because of how central racism is to the public discussion even now. So the Islamic groups in America have very skillfully succeeded in making people think that if you talk about jihad, you talk about Islam's hatred of unbelievers, you talk about the imperative to conquer and humiliate and subjugate the unbelievers, then you're a racist. And if you're a racist, then you're the worst person on earth. And so they have driven this home ever since 9/11 and even before then. Even before then, there was a movie out of a book, The Sum of All Fears by Tom Clancy. An adventure novel. I don't read those things. I don't know much about it, but I do know that in the book, Islamic terrorists are the villains. And so they made a movie of this book in the 1990s, and Council on American Islamic Relations made a big fuss about it and said, you can't make Islamic terrorists the villains. That's Islamophobic. And
They should be the heroes.
Yeah, you will find people making racist attacks against Muslims. And so Hollywood, of course, said, oh, no, we can't do that. So they made them Nazis in the movie. And this was before 9/11. After 9/11, then people like me were saying, yes, this happened because of Islam. This happened because of what the Quran says. And they said, you see, they're racists, they're Islamophobic. So even now, I'm on the list of hate group leaders and so on. And Amazon doesn't want to let me be in part of in several of their programs. And GoFundMe won't let me even donate. I can't, not only can I not raise funds there, I can't even donate to somebody else there because I'm so evil. And all I did was say what was really in the Quran. And it's not just me, of course, it's anybody who spoke about these things. They very skillfully portrayed as racist. And that's the worst thing. Now, of course, Islam is not a race. Muslims are not one race only. There are white jihadis, and I'm against white jihadis, black jihadis, brown jihadis, yellow, green, blue jihadis, all of them. But it's a racial issue in America, and so cannot be discussed. And this is how they've succeeded. This is why Islamophobia has so much play when it's largely fiction.
Yeah, quite right. But do you think things will change?
Yes, things are already changing. People are fed up with this nonsense. They haven't really gotten to Islamophobia, and they haven't really realized yet. But even the charge of racism itself has lost a lot of the power that it once had, because so many people and so many things are called racist now. It's ridiculous. And people have made lists. It's ludicrous. The weather is racist and air is racist. I mean, these things that couldn't possibly be truly racist. But you see the newspapers like the New York Times, the fundamental propaganda outfits of the left, the New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, and they say things like climate change is a big crisis. Of course, that's another big fake hoax. But in any case, climate change is this terrible crisis, and black communities are hardest hit. Well, why? It's hotter there. It's hotter if there's if there's an area where a lot of black people live down the street from an area where a lot of white people live. It's hotter 3 blocks away. Come on. And yet this is the kind of thing that's seriously said in America today. It's insane. We have an insane political climate and an insane cultural climate, and that's why a lot of these things are happening.
Vibhuti?
Yeah, I think, my theory is that how they have captured the imagination of the West and the democracies is something that I have been asking all the time, that how is it that the West is bending backwards to accommodate a faith and be nice to them, to integrate them, the faith that wants you dead. That's a very thing, like, would I keep a hyena as a pet? I might try, but it is definitely not going to help me. I'm not saying those people are hyenas, but the point is that they want you dead. Their entire teaching is about dominance of the whole world. So what I find is that they have found it's not the right word to say underbelly of democracy, but they have definitely found that freedom is the fault line of democracy, and they're very successfully using it.
Yeah.
Even the phobia thing comes up from the 3 philosophies that they follow. They become a vote bank, 9 or 10%, or whatever percentage, they vote en bloc. Then they have violence on the street is the next negotiating tool. And third is claiming victimhood for all of it, because Robert, Sanjay, Vibhuti are to be blamed for my suffering.
Yes.
That's the whole problem. So how does one address that issue? And how would Trump address that issue of the vote bank, violence, and victimhood? How do we address that challenge?
Well, back in 2016, when he was first running for president, he did say that he thinks Islam doesn't like us. And he was coming close to being honest about what we're up against when it comes to Islamic jihad. But he got a lot of criticism for saying that, of course, and the same things, it's racist and so on. And he didn't say anything like that again. Now will he come back to it? I hope so, but I don't know. There needs to be a big reform in the U.S. approach, foreign policy approach altogether. But one of the particular problems with it is that it doesn't even recognize the existence of an Islamic jihad against the rest of the world. The Obama administration got rid of all that. It wasn't even explicitly stated before Obama, but it was possible to speak about it in government and military settings. And I used to do that myself. But the Obama administration changed all of that and removed all mention of Islam and jihad from counterterror training. So one thing Trump can do and should do is reverse that and instruct the military and the FBI and so on to deal honestly with the ideological wellsprings of the jihad threat. Whether he will do that or not, I don't know. But that would go a long way toward correcting a lot of the trouble that we're in right now.
Right. And as you said, Trump last time, when he came, he stopped everyone from Muslim countries.
No.
He stopped giving them visas.
That's a myth. He didn't do that.
Okay, what did he do? And is he planning to do it again?
Yes, he said he's going to do it again, and I hope he will, because it's just common sense. What he did was, it was called, you're right that he said that he would stop that, and that wouldn't have been a bad idea. In the first place, many people think, oh, see, you are really a racist. This is the apex of racism. You're saying Muslims can't come into the country, but everybody else can. Well, in the first place, it's not really a racial problem, because the people we're dealing with here are of all different races. But quite aside from that, why does anybody have any natural right to move from one country to another? Now, a country can have different policies on that. But why does any country have an obligation to take in anybody else? Why? Is not the head of state of any country, or the head of government at very least, does he not or she have the obligation to take care of his or her own people first, as opposed to everybody else? Is the Prime Minister of India supposed to be looking out for everybody in Gabon or Central African Republic or Uruguay? Well, it has nothing to do with him. So why does it have to do with the United States that everybody has to come? And of course, people say, well, they're real refugees and so on. Okay, I'm not saying then that nobody can come. You bring in people with real need, but at a certain point, you are putting the people who are already here at a disadvantage, because you're bringing in all these people who are going to be dependent upon the government, which means more taxes, more people who are working for less, and for what? Anyway, quite aside from that, on the topic, Trump originally did say, yes, he would bar migration from Muslim countries, and people said, oh, what a terrible racist and Islamophobe. But think about this. There are jihadis among Muslims. Not all Muslims are jihadis, but some of them are. No non-Muslims are jihadis. All jihadis are Muslims, but not all Muslims are jihadis, correct? So we bring in 100 Muslims into the United States, and people say, oh, only 1 in 100 is a jihadi. Okay, so one of them's a jihadi, or maybe more if it's really more than 1 in 100.
They're close at jihadis.
Yes. So we bring in 1,000, there's 10 jihadis. We bring in 1,000,000, there's 100 jihadis. Or 10,000, there's 100 jihadis. And so on and so on. So how do we tell the jihadis from the non-jihadis? We can't, because they lie. That's part of the religion, to lie. And because they have every reason to conceal who they are if they're jihadis and they want to get in and sow destruction. So we have two choices. We let in the people and some of them are killers. And so some of the people here are going to get killed because we let in the killers. Or we keep out those people, and some people who are not killers don't get to come. Those are the choices. You either let in the killers with the non-killers, or you keep out the killers and the non-killers, right? So Trump was saying, we can't tell one from the other. We can't tell the killers from the non-killers. So instead of putting our people at risk, we'll keep them all out. What's wrong with that? Seriously.
Makes sense.
What's the problem? There's no other population where you can be sure that some of them are killers, because there's no other religion or philosophy that calls for the believers to kill the unbelievers. But they do. We have to be realistic about it. You know it and I know it. So he didn't do that. He said he would do it. He didn't do it. And I know it wouldn't have been possible for him to do, because he would have been charged with racism. He would have been impeached. He would have been kicked out of office, any number of things. So instead, what he did was he actually enforced a list that the Obama administration, interestingly enough, had made but didn't enforce. That there were, I think, 13 countries, 7 of which were Muslim, but the other 6 were not, where the people coming in, we couldn't tell anything about them. The other governments were not giving the United States adequate information about the people coming in. Why should any country admit people when we don't know who they are and we don't know what their background is? That's obviously taking a risk. Should I take a gun that's loaded with, it's got 6 chambers and loaded with 1 bullet and fire it at my head? Why would I do that? At one point, that's going to be suicide. So why should the United States bring in these people? And that was called the Muslim ban because of Trump's earlier statements that he did not act on. But it was not even all Muslim countries. And if those countries, when some of those countries started to provide the adequate information, they were taken off the list. So this was not a racist thing or something like that. It was just about national security. And this is what he's talking about implementing again, which he very much ought to do.
The media has always been anti-Trump. Like, for example, immigration. I mean, he has quite a lot of things on his plate to handle, because now he says he wants to deport all the 11 million illegal immigrants who have come in the last 3-4 years. Mm-hmm. And he wants to begin with the criminal ones. So that's the process will be there. But from this point of view, the Muslim ban that happened, Trump at that time did not have the political suaveness of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. These two guys, and I had said in my commentary that if he had even 10% of the political suaveness of either of these guys or both these guys, he would go big time successfully, bigly successful, to use his word. But the point of the matter is that he was blunt, truthful, and honest in his prescription. The question again back to that is that he has this time chosen a very clear anti-terror squad in his administration, national intelligence and wherever else. I think he may succeed. The challenge here is whether the elements embedded in the system already, which is known as popularly or unpopularly as deep state, will they allow them to carry on? Beginning with the FBI chief himself.
That's the big question, and it's going to be a difficult battle. When he's talking about deporting all those illegal migrants, who could really be against that? These people, I mean, look, you and I both know there are perfectly legal avenues to get into the United States. And people who come here and work, what's the problem? Welcome, great. And then there are these people who come in and they cross from the Rio Grande or wherever, and we don't know who they are, and we don't know what their criminal background is, and we don't know if they're terrorists or whatever else. And he wants to have them leave. Why would anybody oppose this? It staggers me. But in any case, if he does it, if he starts to deport illegal migrants on a massive scale, the protests from the left are going to be off the charts.
Yeah.
And they're going to be claiming that he is brutalizing these people and that it's a violation of human rights, and they will take him to the International Criminal Court, and they will take him to the United Nations, and they will throw up every roadblock they can to make sure that he doesn't do this. Because they want these people here. They want to dilute the national culture and the national character. They want to have a steady voting base of dependence on the U.S. government. And so they will go to any lengths to ensure that they continue to have those things.
If I may ask, within this, of course, a lot will depend on how the State Department looks at it, and whether I don't know whether the State Department and the deep state, Marco Rubio coming in, will have any impact.
Mhm.
But I'm also looking at Europe, and I'm somehow not very optimistic about Europe coming on top of the Islam problem, because Trump may save America, but will his intervention or the change of narrative within the United States have any impact on Europe's Islam problem?
If Trump manages to succeed in managing the migrant crisis and in actually doing something about jihad activity, and if he succeeds on the foreign policy in the foreign policy arena, in strengthening America and its allies rather than strengthening America's enemies, as Biden has been doing, that will have an effect in Europe. Already we have seen Trudeau in Canada and Macron in France start speaking about doing something about stopping the illegal migration, when they never would have said this before, but they're seeing the writing on the wall in terms of the next election and in terms of the fact that the policies that Trump is espousing are popular even among their own people. So Europe is in very bad shape, and they don't even have any clue about what's happening to them, because you look at there were polls done before the American election. You probably saw them. And in every country in Europe, Kamala Harris won by massive margins. I mean, 75%, 90%. Everybody hates Trump in Europe because they get this leftist propaganda all the time, and there's no counterweight. There's no other voice that's allowed, and so they're like the proverbial frog in the slowly boiling water. They don't have any idea what's happening, and they're just going to go on to their destruction. However, if Trump actually does these things and they succeed, it won't be possible to conceal. And it will be a great boost for parties such as the Alternative for Deutschland, the AfD in Germany, and the Marine Le Pen in France, and Nigel Farage in Britain, the Sweden Democrats, and so on. They all and Wilders Party in the Netherlands, all of these, they would likely have majorities in those countries if it weren't for electoral chicanery as well as relentless propaganda that is unopposed. And if Trump succeeds, they will have another significant impetus. They're very popular and growing in popularity because people can't help but wake up, but still Europe's a long way from waking up in general.
Okay, last word, Vibhuti.
My last word would be that with Muhammad becoming the fastest growing name in London and UK, will drawing the picture of Muhammad still be a punishable offense?
Well, that's true. I could draw a picture right now and say, this is Muhammad, the guy that sells falafel down the street. But yeah, it's interesting that this is happening in Britain because it does make for people waking up. But you got to wonder if it's too late. I never think it's too late, even if it's too late. That if Sharia is imposed in Britain, there will still be people resisting, and it won't be too late even then. But things are very dire there, and I don't think they'll escape a lot of strife. But even things like this little detail about the births is waking people up now. And it looks like the Reform Party might make great gains in the next government. People hate the Starmer government. On the other hand, what are they going to do? It's not like these people are there illegally. A lot of them are there now, second, third, fourth generation, and they're born there. They don't have any other home. Where are you going to deport them to? They weren't born in Pakistan. So I don't know if Britain can escape conquest and Islamization at this point. But even if it doesn't, there will always be some resistance.
J.K. Rowling has to create an actual Harry Potter.
Yeah. The real thing. Yeah.
Okay. So I think on that note, we can stop today's conversation. I think we have understood or tried to understand a lot of things that can happen, may or may not happen, but they can happen. And of course, we will meet Robert soon enough to discuss his critical biography of Muhammad. That's very important.
Yes. Thank you. I look forward to it.
Yes, I'm going to buy that now.
Okay.
The
Thank
pity is that we have to buy it and pay for it and then talk about it. That's great.
Yes, you have to hit that buy now button.
I'll do that. Take care.
So thank you, Robert. Thank you, Vibhuti.
Thank you.
A wonderful discussion, and we'll soon have more of these discussions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Bye-bye.